Think I need a little levity this morning.
I thought so.
You're right. I probably do. Oh. Thanks again, Grant, for moderating this. I sure appreciate that.
Yep.
The times I have to moderate a meeting, I don't do it very well, so I appreciate your special help.
I'll tell you stories later about students and moderating meetings.
You should probably be keeping a journal, and you could probably make money off of writing out your experiences as distance learning during the health crisis of 2020.
Yeah, I've thought about that on the typical day, much less all this.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, the typical day would be good. Or you and Cindy, you could consult together, and both of you could, add your stories and work off each other. You might make a living off of that for the rest of your life, residual income from that book.
What do you think, Cindy? You want to write a memoir on teaching?
No.
You want to forget it as soon as possible, huh? Oh.
Yeah, especially Zoom teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is Microsoft Teams easier to use than Zoom? Maybe. Cindy, you use Microsoft Teams, right?
Well, our school uses that when we have meetings, but all I've done is just attend. So I don't know if it's any easier to set up or anything like that. So.
Oh, okay. So in your classroom, you use Zoom.
Because that's what I started with, and I wasn't changing if I didn't have to.
Okay, yeah.
And our district mandated all of us to use Zoom for students.
Okay.
They might change us to Team when there were all those problems, but they never did. So.
Well, welcome back, everyone, so far. Connecting again. Thank you.
Did you guys tell that I got a call right when I connected in? Like right when I was connecting in, I got a call. Did it affect you guys at all?
No.
No, I didn't notice.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Usually when I'm trying to record on Saturday, I get a call or a text or something, but yesterday I didn't, so that was kind of nice.
The meeting is being recorded.
I was in a meeting last week where somebody was getting a text like every 2 minutes. And it's like, mute your phone for Pete's sake.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Internet's slow today.
Is it?
It's like it took a long time to connect both times.
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe it's super busy.
I suppose.
Or Charlene, maybe I was slow at clicking the let Charlene in button.
No, it was like slow, just just in general,
Yeah.
It might be the internet.
Sean has joined the meeting.
Oh, Sean's
Oh,
with us
there she is.
again.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Hi, Sean.
Hello.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I like to start out with a chance for you to share anything that was helpful to you or meaningful in your devotion time. And I usually think of devotion time related to our Bible study, but that doesn't have to be that way at all. Maybe there's something that's been helpful to you and you'd like to share that. That would be super. I'm totally convinced that if it's been helpful to you, it's probably would be helpful to somebody else. So anybody have something going on in your devotion time that you'd like to share?
Well, just a fun fact, we did a special project with the worship service on Proverbs 31 today, and I discovered that Proverbs 31 is an acrostic poem, and I hadn't known that before. I thought that was pretty cool. So in the original language, each of the verses starts with a different consecutive letter of the alphabet, and I didn't know that. I thought that was neat.
Yeah.
It didn't fit into our project to mention that, so
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
mention it here, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you ever would like to memorize the Hebrew alphabet, you can turn to Psalm 119. And in most modern English Bibles, the stanzas, I think there are 8 verses per stanza. I could be wrong about that number. Each verse in that stanza begins with the letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and those letters are also in consecutive order. And in many English Bibles, they'll label the stanza with the Hebrew letter. And so if you have a Bible that does that, then you can be an expert and know the Hebrew alphabet by studying Psalm 119.
For whatever reason.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's one of the probably a memory tool for helping people when the Psalms were written and in generations after that, by having alphabet letters starting the verses or starting the stanzas. When I think of Mother's Day, I think of being a kid in Sunday school and being taught the Mother song in Sunday school. It takes Mother, M-O-T-H-E-R, and has things that you sing that relates to that. You don't know that, huh? Maybe that was a Kansas thing. Anyway, that fits. So maybe it fits better than you think, Grant. Anybody else? Something that you were helped by or was meaningful to you or interesting for you in your devotion this week, your quiet times, or
Well-
just casual? Go ahead.
I would just like to extend a huge thank you to you for replying to my question that was, completely unrelated to our Sunday school lesson, but you really went the extra mile, Pastor Dude, and it was probably the most helpful and best 2 emails I've ever gotten in my life. So
Wow.
thank
Well, good. That's
you.
great. Well, thank you, Gloria. I'm glad it was helpful. Good. I've done that other times too. So it wasn't just for you, but I'm glad to do that for anyone. Gloria had some questions. She had listened to, or maybe had read a sermon online, and she had some questions that she was thinking about, and so she asked for my opinion. So I read through the sermon and gave her some of my thoughts that I felt like might be helpful, and I guess it turned out that they were. So that's good, Gloria. I'm glad that they could be helpful to you.
Very much so.
I'm glad to do that anytime for anybody. Don't feel like you have to have some sort of special privilege. I'm glad to do that anytime if it can be helpful for you. I was doing the reading in our last week's lessons. You know, the way our lesson book puts it together, we study together the verses, and then the days following that go into personal reading related to what we studied in our Sunday school time, our Bible study time. And on day 5 last week, the lesson writers had us read Ephesians 6:18 through 20, and that's where Paul asks his Ephesian friends, well, actually, probably the letter to the Ephesians was circulated to several churches. So he's asking churches to pray for him in boldness. And the lesson writers assume that that means that Paul was afraid, and that's why he was asking for boldness. And they challenge us to think about things that we're afraid of. The question they left with was, what fears do you have when it comes to sharing the gospel and calling others to repentance? And I don't think that Paul was afraid. I think that's a misapplication of Paul's request for boldness. But I do think it's a great question. And it made me realize that the current pandemic has made me afraid of people calling me selfish. And it's interesting. Some of you know that one of my sons lives in Chicago, and I mentioned a few weeks ago that Andy was talking with Karen and I, and without any, he wasn't mean about it. He wasn't using it as an attack, but Andy referred to us being selfish at going and visiting Katie and her family on a Sunday afternoon. And it really has bothered me that someone, not just Andy, I mean, that's a kind of a separate issue, and I don't want to bring the Andy part of it in, but it's pretty common out there right now for people to think if you go to the grocery store without your face covered, that you're being selfish. And that if you go outside your house, you might be selfish. That if you're not doing the kinds of things that they think are appropriate to keep from spreading this disease, that you're being selfish. And I find that hard because I don't think I'm being selfish, and yet that attack or that challenge makes me feel like I don't know what to do with that. I don't know. It was interesting. It gave me a chance to think about something that's been brewing under the surface for me for quite a while. Anybody else struggling with that? And is that something that you have thought about? And if so, maybe you have some help for me. I would be glad. I saw Sean nodding a little bit. You know, have you found a way to kind of deal with that, or?
No, because I think my struggle is in some ways the opposite, where I'm struggling against feeling like other people are being selfish. Like when I'm walking along the sidewalk and someone's coming towards me without a face mask and thinking, oh, how dare they jeopardize my existence or something like that. So I think my struggle has been, how do we live through this without pointing fingers at people all the time?
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think that's right on. I was feeling the pressure on me, and you're just saying, as one who thinks about that, I don't want that to turn into becoming my way of accusing everybody I meet.
Exactly. And that's what I feel that we're becoming, and that I feel it in
Yeah.
myself, is that we are turning into people who are pointing fingers and accusing, and othering, like you are bad because you're doing this. And I feel that in myself, and I know it's not of Christ. I know that is not that's not of God.
Yeah, I think it's of our culture. I think our culture is pushing us that way. And many times as Christians, we feel the pressure from our culture, and we feel the fear about how to deal with that pressure. Whether it's to, keep your mouth shut, don't talk about religious stuff, or don't tell me about prayer, or look, you're being selfish in your actions. And I find that hard to know what to do in the face of that.
Added to that, I wear masks and gloves, but with my family, with smokers and stuff, it's like I feel that I'm thinking about trying to encourage them to quit again, or to quit. So, and with people that I visit. So one situation, my mask fell off, so I just left it off. It's one of the masks that came brought from Cambodia, but then I into smoking. I've had a lot of secondhand smoke over the years.
Yeah. 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 That reminds me, many years ago, I used to go to people's homes and do Bible studies with them. And I would come home from I would meet with about 3 or 4 other ladies. And my kids would always say when I got home, "Oh, you've been with those smoking gals, haven't you?" Because they could smell the smoke on my clothes. And it was unusual in our home to have that smell. So I know what you mean, Lon. I guess as I think about the selfish thing, I think I don't have any problem with anybody doing something they feel like is important to protect themselves. I consider that just responsible choices. But when I feel like others are attacking me for behavior that I don't think is that way, then I struggle with how to deal with that. Well, anyway, maybe that's enough. I don't really have an answer, but it gave me a chance to think about that specifically in terms of fears that I have. I approach people out there in feeling unjustly accused and not knowing how to manage that maybe injustice. And I don't mean it as a accusation, more as they just don't see the world like I do. And that's really hard. So anyway, Paul's request for prayer, that we would know what to say and how to say it, makes good sense in that kind of situation, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Well, let's press. Was somebody else going to share something?
I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. Hey, I'll take agreement anytime, Glory. Thank you. Well, let's go ahead and go to Mark chapter 1. That's our chapter for today. Mark chapter 1, and it starts at verse 21. I'm going to read these verses, and then I'll give you a chance to share something that you think is meaningful. Mark 1 verses 21 through 28. This is right away now, early in Jesus' ministry. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. Just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly. "Come out of him." The evil spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority. He even gives orders to evil spirits and they obey him." News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Our lesson writers say Jesus reveals his power. What do you notice in those verses?
There's power in prayer.
You see Jesus' words as prayer?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Certainly also power in teaching. Jesus' authority in teaching was self-authority. He didn't quote the rabbis. He didn't quote the Talmud. He just said, this is the way it is. And so his authority really stood out to people listening to him teach.
And I believe that that's probably a gift that God gave him.
Yeah, and that he assumed because he knew what God wanted him to say.
I think it's hard for us to connect to these kind of passages because we don't see this in our world, in the United States anyway. I think in other countries there are examples of this now, but we don't see it. So
You're thinking of the spirit part?
Yeah. Casting out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, certainly some people would say, oh, that's just, non-medical way to look at something. I would say it's Jesus showing his power over evil spirits. Those of us who have heard Huang share some of his stories from Cambodia and Vietnam and just the presence of evil spirits in people there and how that works, realize that there's a world out there that isn't the same as our world. And I think that's important even today to know.
I find it interesting that wasn't, as you read the passage, it's talking about how Jesus, had authority in his teaching, and he didn't call the spirit out. The evil spirit is the one that, first said to Jesus, what do you have to do with us? Jesus wasn't there to call out the evil spirit. He was there to teach. So I find that interesting.
Yeah. It's like the evil spirit set up this encounter on his own initiative almost.
But they knew that he's both the Son of God and Son of Man.
I thought it was interesting that they asked Jesus if he came to destroy him.
Yeah.
I wonder if the evil spirit had not spoken, if Jesus would have not drawn him out of the man. I'm thinking that he kind of the evil spirit kind of led to its own demise.
Yeah.
If he had shut up, he maybe, yeah, speaking of that, I'm going to shut up.
Yeah. Well, certainly Mark is thinking that Jesus' teaching has authority, but also Jesus himself had authority because he could command demons and they obeyed him.
Wow.
So it's a way of Mark underlining Jesus' great authority.
I wonder, he starts teaching, he's teaching something different, and if the people listening, if they think, do we really have to listen to this guy? And then when an impure spirit has to listen to him, if they say, well, hey, if that has to listen to him, then does it sort of strengthen the case for the need to follow what Jesus says?
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, I sure think it strengthens his authority. Yeah, I don't know if we're people tending to just say, oh, it's interesting, I'll have to think about this. And after this encounter with the evil spirit, they're thinking, whoa, I better deal with this now. Maybe so. Maybe so.
Well, you have to think about, that the person who had the evil spirit inside of them, he must have had family and friends, and, were they aware of the evil spirit in him? Or, did it just suddenly reveal itself because of Jesus? And now all the people are like, whoa, what if, what's going to come out of me,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Certainly this encounter, the teaching and the exorcism, if we want to use that word, Jesus' reputation spread quickly, so it was a big deal.
I think it's interesting that they focus on the teaching, that's their first reaction. He exorcises this demon and they go, wow, a really cool teacher who's teaching with authority, right? It's interesting that that's what the focus of this passage is, that he goes into the synagogue, they're amazed at his teaching. He exorcises a demon, they're amazed at his teaching. So what is it about it that hooks them, that they're like, wow, that's really cool teaching?
Yeah, amen. We would tend to be captured by the exorcism.
Right.
Oh, what did you see that? We would think, oh, the teaching, who cares?
Right, exactly. But they kind of exclaim, what's this? A new teaching.
Yeah. Look at this authority that's behind this teaching. Yeah.
What do you think that they saw? Because they said it's authority that was different than the scribes. So what do you think that means?
Most scholars refer to the fact that the scribes would all talk about the traditions of the elders as the reason for their teaching, and they go back into the Talmud and they quote others. And so Jesus in his teaching doesn't quote the elders or the Talmud or things that are written ahead beforehand. Jesus just says, this is what God says. For example, Jesus will read verses in Isaiah and said, these verses have now been fulfilled in your hearing right now. And people are going, whoa, there's no reference to other rabbis and there's no reference to other teaching. He's just saying, this is God working right now. So I think that's what many scholars would say to that, Sean. There probably is also sort of the body language and the nonverbalness of authority of Jesus. I think that there was probably something about Jesus that you just didn't miss his authority. The fishermen, they fish all night, tired, ready to go in. They give Jesus a chance to talk from their boats, and he says, okay, guys, let's go out and fish some more. And they go, but they do it, and they catch more fish than they've caught in their whole life. That Jesus' authority he just carried himself with authority that was so different than anything they experienced in any other situation. So those would be my answers. There could very well be some other things that are part and parcel of Jesus' authority.
Yeah, the other thing that I just kind of noticed is that, when Jesus went to the synagogue and taught, and it's a little bit different setting than all this, any time he's out other places
Mm-hmm.
that the crowd gathers around, and that crowd's not there to hear his teaching. That crowd, for the most part, is following him around, wanting to either get a miracle or watch a miracle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Isn't Jesus just continuing to be tempted by Satan on being Son of God, Son of Man? I see that like going back and forth on whether it's the demons or the religious leaders that, if you're Son of God, or they say you're Jesus of Nazareth, but that you're the Son of God. So Jesus is being tempted to sin in using his divine powers to not sin, but he has to trust the scriptures, God, to not sin, and that I just see that back and forth, that he's the Son of God and Son of Man, and he's been tested on that, tempted on that. I struggle on that. I think I've had understanding on that, but the more I look at the scriptures, I'm not sure how that all plays out for Christ, for us, and for us.
Yeah, maybe that was a trick. Because when the demon cried out, people they look at it, they're not seeing a demon, they're seeing a person in the congregation there asking a question of Jesus. And a kind of accusatory question too. If you're thinking that, it's one thing to think, hey, this demon is asking Jesus, what are you going to do with me? And are you going to destroy me? But maybe, when he's in a person like that, the person is asking that, and takes on a lot different look.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that. In other words, the people watching might have not understood that this was a demon speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And in that misunderstanding, that might have come out like a great accusation against Jesus by people.
Right.
Where Mark realizes, as he tells us about it, that he wants us to know that it was an evil spirit speaking, not a person. Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that type of dynamic to it.
Well, especially because they're in the synagogue, so the people certainly wouldn't have expected an evil spirit to be, with them there in the synagogue.
Maybe,
right?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes evil spirits in people are well known. The people around them know that this person is trapped by evil spirit. They throw themselves in the fire and they cut themselves and they hurt themselves. So there are times when people understand that an evil spirit is behind what's happening to this poor victim. Now, whether that was the case here, I'm not sure. And I had not thought about considering that others, not knowing the real story, might have misunderstood what was going on, especially at first. So that's interesting.
I think the point that Lon brought up is really interesting, because I hadn't really thought about why does the unclean spirit mention those two parts of Jesus? Why does he say, I know you, you're of Nazareth, and I know you, you're of God? Mm-hmm. Why bring up those 2 points? The Jesus of Nazareth almost calls to mind that, like, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Like, you're nothing, but yet you're everything. So it's interesting that he brings up those 2 points, and I don't quite know why.
Yeah. Yeah, often the evil spirits seem to know Jesus better than most people do. And,
he's almost giving him away. Like everybody else just
Yeah.
sees Jesus of Nazareth in a way, and then he's like, actually, I know who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jesus often says, you know, calm it down, maybe because he doesn't want that source to be the authentication of who he is. That source isn't to be trusted. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Well,
I suppose because Jesus also says that that when Satan lies, he's speaking his native language, and so he doesn't want to allow them to speak to be the bearers of the truth.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if we don't have more evil spirits in our midst than we realize too. Like I've thought about that since I've known Wang. You know, that maybe there's what we call a lot of the mental illness and things. So you kind of wonder sometimes if some of it isn't possession.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder that too, Charlene. I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
I suspect that we probably tend to explain things away as mental illness when there are more spiritual reasons behind it. But on the other hand, I don't want to diminish the seriousness of mental illness or somehow make it less than it is. Well, our time is almost gone. Let me read the next section because it's an interesting thing that I wanted to have us think about. Verse 35, early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone's looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let's go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there also. This is why I've come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. And the point that I wanted to have us maybe notice is that Jesus says, "That's why I've come." And I think as Mark tells the story, he wants the readers to be asking this question: why have you come, Jesus? What is it that you're about? Are you just a preacher, or is there more to it than that? And as even in this chapter or the next chapter, chapter 2, Jesus heals the paralytic by first saying, "Your sins are forgiven." And then he says, "So that you can know that I have power to forgive sins, I say to you, take up your mat and walk." You remember that story. I think Mark wants us to be asking the question as we read his gospel, why has Jesus come? And I was going to just give you a chance. As you think about Jesus, what comes to your mind about why he came? Why did Jesus come and have this ministry that we read about in the Gospels? What comes to your mind?
During last week and the previous section, I keep thinking of John 3:17. God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And it seems like there have been a lot of parallels to that. Jesus trying to remind people, this isn't about me condemning you, but it's a saving.
Yeah, I'm here to save.
Sin, victory.
You remember last week we ended with the verses last week. The Son of Man didn't come to the healthy, but to the sick. You know, that idea that comes out a little bit later in Mark's gospel. So saving the people who need it. What else comes to your mind? Why did Jesus come?
He came to tell the truth and to shed light on the truth. in every situation, you know, even when it came to evil spirits in the synagogue. He came to be the light, to, and I think that's where all his authority in his teaching comes from, because what he was saying was the truth.
Yeah. Well, our time is basically gone. Think about that a little bit deeper. Why did Jesus come? What are the things that Jesus came to do? Let me pray real quick. Lord, thank you for a chance to read your word together, talk about it, and to think about its application in our lives. Help us not just to understand it, but to live it, and that you would live through us. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thank you all for your conversation this morning. What a great opportunity to get together. Thank you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Amen.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.